Like you, I'm not really a big fan of Trump. However, I do believe he's better than the alternative.
Perfectly reasonable argument.
Right. So I was curious on how you would justify not voting for president.
How did I justify not voting for president?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two ways of viewing voting. One way of viewing voting is that your vote is basically a coupon that expires the day after the election. You have to do it, right? Your vote is, otherwise what's the point, right? Your vote expires, what's the problem? You pick one of the two, one of them's going to win, you vote for one of them. That's one way of viewing voting, and that is that it's just an instrument of policy. And if it were just an instrument of policy, I probably would have voted for Trump. Now, if it's not just an instrument of policy, then you have a different standard for your vote, which is, okay, neither of these people meet my minimum standard to be president of the United States, and therefore I am not going to cast the way I see my own vote. Now, admittedly, I'm in a kind of a weird situation because as a public commentator, a lot of people want to hear my opinion on these particular issues. And so I think that my vote does show moral approbation for a candidate. That's why everyone cares about my vote, right? I'm in California. My vote doesn't matter squat. And my vote, he lost California by a bajillion illegal votes, supposedly. So it's two ways of viewing a vote. I think my way of viewing a vote is better. The reason I think that my way of viewing a vote is better is because if everyone applied my rule to voting, we would get good campaign history running against each other, and then you have to decide whether you would like the, as they say on South Park, the turd sandwich with a giant douche. Right? So you know, and you may be happy that one or the other got elected. I mean, I'm very happy with some of the policies that Trump has pursued in the first 2 weeks. I think Trump is still Trump, so you know that's the downside. But that's my view of not voting in this. He didn't earn my vote. Maybe he'll earn my vote for re-election. I'm open to that.
So if you vote from a moral standpoint, why wouldn't you write in the candidate who you thought would be a better choice?
Because I didn't. I mean, I guess I could write in like Winston Churchill, but he's dead. I mean, he wasn't eligible anyway. He wasn't born here. I mean, his mom was an American citizen, so arguable. But there weren't a lot of people who, like, I'm not sure. At that point, it was like I was too lazy to write in a name, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much.
There's been a whole lot of disagreement between both political parties, and they're not real close to agreeing on anything. Are there any areas where you actually have found that you disagree with the Republican Party over time, or think they've even gotten too conservative?
Well, I mean, I am, as I say, libertarian on the issue of marriage. I'm also libertarian on marijuana decriminalization. So I think that the government sucks at that too. Again, my basic rule of thumb is the government's terrible at everything. So that's one area. I have significant qualms with the sort of halo effect that has accrued around Donald Trump after winning. Like the idea that when he says something bad, now it's good because it's Donald Trump. I think that's asinine. And I'm seeing that from a lot of people in my own party, which is, okay, he says something ridiculous about how America is just like Vladimir Putin. We kill people too. Right? When it's that routine, like, no, that's bad. And I'm glad you like his tax policy, that's still bad. And if Obama said it, we'd be out in the streets all pissed off. I have a very simple rule of thumb on this sort of thing, and that is put the shoe on the other foot, see how it fits. If Obama did exactly the same thing, would you be upset or not upset? I think some of the stuff Trump has done is, I think that the right has suddenly started greenlighting things like, for example, the carrier deal. Right? Suddenly that's okay. Suddenly crony capitalism is okay if Trump's doing it. And my answer is no, it's not okay. So that's one area where I suppose I disagree with the right.
Are there any areas where you actually feel like you agree more with the Democrats, given that most people seem to not entirely be on board with their party at times?
Well, I wish that the Democrats were less them. It's hard to find an area of agreement with the Democrats because everything is done so militantly. So, as I say, I'm libertarian on the issue of marriage, but they're not. Right? The Democratic Party position is that they'd like to cram down gay marriage from the state level on religious business owners, for example. So their basic philosophy is not my basic philosophy. It's going to be hard to find points of agreement with the Democratic Party on any of this stuff. And so, I mean, we'd have to go issue by issue. My guess is that there are probably areas where more moderate Democrats agree with me, but I would see that as them moving to me, not the opposite. So.
Hi.
Howdy.
I drove up from Detroit today, so I obviously have a lot more liberals in my area than what north of Grand Rapids has.
Mm-hmm.
One of the hardest arguments that I come across is like the guilt of association from the, like, people say like I voted the same way as KKK, even though I didn't vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Because I'm like straight male, I obviously did.
Right.
But how would you argue it?
Yeah, you voted the same way as all the commies. I mean, right? I mean, the argument from association is a terrible argument because it assumes immediately that you are associated personally with the people who acted in the same way. This is like the argument that whenever people say it's just like Hitler, or when people do that routine, he's doing this and it's just like Hitler. Yeah, Hitler had a dog. Okay, like you have to actually determine whether the respect in which you are making the comparison is the valid respect, right? So if the argument is you voted for Donald Trump because you want white supremacy, just like the KKK, then they actually have to prove that you voted for Donald Trump because you want white supremacy. If they just say you voted the same way as the KKK, well, I mean, crap, they voted the same way as Casey Anthony apparently. So there are a lot of bad people who vote for both sides. The argument from association is extraordinarily weak.
All right, and then I kind of have a favor to ask.
Sure.
This election, I didn't know who to vote for, and I ended up voting third party.
Mm-hmm.
The favor is, can you run when you are actually?
Well, I think that we've learned pretty well over the past few election cycles that if you're not the son of the president, the spouse of the president, or an insanely rich reality TV star, then you have a rough time of it. So.
That's the problem.
My question comes from a political science argument. I'm a political science student here at Ferris.
Yeah, the least of the sciences, yeah.
Yeah.
I was a poli-sci major too, yeah.
No.
Good luck in law school.
Yeah, that's the goal, working on the LSAT.
That's the goal for everybody, because that's what this country desperately needs, more lawyers.
Well, tonight I listened to you talk a lot about social movements, and what I specialize in at both here and before I came here, my area of interest is political mobilization.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you feel about problems, particularly because you're a media figure and as a commentator, that with most, we've heard a lot about fake news and the problems in mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about major companies like CNN or Fox really just being private corporations, kind of drumming up a media populism that just divides people when there's very clearly better solutions in the middle that we can actually work together as Americans?
Okay, so this is really a little bit of a complex question. So first of all, it's not the private corporation thing that's the problem. The worst thing you could have is the government actually controlling the means of production of news. Right, so I want to take that off the table immediately. As far as the problems that exist in the fake news sphere, so first of all, originally when people said fake news, what they meant is an actual factually false story. And then immediately that became conflated with, you don't like the narrative that somebody is drawing from true facts. So suddenly you would see somebody make an argument, like you'd see somebody say that, it's fake news that Donald Trump's inauguration crowd was in person the biggest size in history. It's not true. Right, that's fake news. But what you'd hear from people is that it was fake news for the Democrats to draw a conclusion from his statement about that. And so what you'll get is, I just don't agree with the argument, therefore it's fake news. And that's silly. That's just disagreement. I had this conversation earlier today with somebody actually about the nature of news and what's happening, and it is true that we're now getting our news basically from sources that agree with us, and that's facilitated by a lot of social media that has algorithms that are designed to cater to you as a consumer. And so if you read Breitbart, it's also going to recommend that you read Daily Caller, or if you read Huffington Post, it's also going to recommend that you read MSNBC. And so there's this kind of enclave news issue that's being created. The answer to that, in my opinion, is for all outlets to state their biases up front. You know where I'm coming from. I'm very obvious about my opinions. And that means that when you check out my website, you're going to take everything with a grain of salt. You know where I'm coming from, and as I say, I'm obvious about my opinions. I think that's the best way to come at it. And then you're just going to have to, we're going to have to become better news consumers. But that's on us. Because you're right, the market caters to whatever people want. And if they want stories about how Donald Trump's crowd is the biggest, or about how there's an actual Muslim ban, even though there is no actual Muslim ban, right? If they want to do that, then that's what the news business is going to cater to, unfortunately.
Right. What I meant by when I was saying the private corporation comment is that obviously the alternative is much, much worse because you no longer live in a free society.
Right.
What I went, but you kind of answered my question when I was saying that you're right because it has to cater. It's not that it does cater.
Right. Now, the market dictates that you're going to cater to the market, but the answer is change the market itself, meaning that people are going to have to decide that they actually care about truth and not just about reinforcement of their agenda. And that's actually going to take a sea change. It's going to take a little bit of intellectual honesty on both sides. And I'm not saying it from either side right now very much, actually.
No, the problem really comes from both sides. But again, as someone who's really interested in mobilization, I don't know if you were particularly interested in that when you were studying political science. How do you feel that we really need to move forward into breaking that up? Because, like I said earlier, there are very clearly...
It's not a matter of just breaking up big media conglomerates. It's a matter of the market itself, as you say, is dictating the coverage. And so, listen, I'm flattered that the outlet that I run, where I sort of try and pride myself on conservative independence, meaning that on my podcast, I do a good Trump, bad Trump thing. We even have a jingle for it, right? So when he does something good, I praise him. When he does something bad, I criticize him. our audience has grown massively. We have 300,000 people a day who download our show. On our website, which didn't exist a year and a half ago, we cater to that same sort of audience, and we're going to have 30 million page views this month, which for a startup website is very large. So I think there is a hunger for it, but I think that there's two ways this could go, right? One way is that we just continue to polarize, which is very possible, and the other is that people just get sick of this crap, and eventually they just say, I don't know what to believe. And so I'm going to find people who appear to be honest and who appear to care about the truth, even though they have a partisan agenda.
Okay, the last thing with that, do you think that, like you're saying with all of those answers that you just gave me, and the fact that now, because of the massive impact of social media and what we've seen in voting and elections and really just everyday life, that you think that that's eventually going to lead to more intellectual honesty with both the media and political honesty?
As I said, I'm not sure. I think we're at an inflection point. It could be more intellectual honesty, it could be a lot less, which would be very scary.
Thank you.
Hello.
Howdy.
Earlier you were talking about degrees in sociology and such as that.
I think it's a mushy field, as you may
gather. Mushy fields and such and such. But in a discussion of welding and such, and those types of fields of study, you make it seem as though they're going to eternally be there.
No.
Oh.
They're there right now.
Yeah, they're there right now, but what happens when many of these people who got in these fields lose their jobs due to automation or something in that nature?
They're going to have to adapt and get new jobs. That's how the economy works.
But what happens when the automation takes away a majority of the jobs that we can just shuffle our fingers to do?
Yeah, so this actually...
Would you pay a person $10 an hour or buy a robot for $900 if it can do jobs?
Yeah, so automation is actually a really good question, and where kind of we're going as a society in terms of the rise of technology, there are a couple different theories about where we're going as an economy as technology takes over more and more of our lives. So right now, for example, everybody is very hot on Uber and Lyft, which is fantastic. They're great services. What happens when we have automated cars, right? And all the Uber and Lyft drivers are out of business, which is not that far away because Google has an automated car. So there are two possibilities in the economy, and then there's a possible solution on one. So forgive the complexity. Here are the two possibilities. One is the economy gets ever more specialized and a bunch of jobs are created in fields we don't even know about yet. So for example, the idea 50 years ago that you would have chains of coffee shops around the country that were dedicated to building you an individual drink. People 50 years ago would have thought you're a fool. You're a fool. Like, you could literally walk into any diner and for 5 cents you could plunk down and get a cup of coffee. And now you're going to pay $7 for a venti, latte, mocha, cappuccino, frappuccino with pod. Right? So all those jobs exist in a way that they didn't exist before. People didn't think that there were going to be jobs in technologies that are new. So the idea is that whenever there is a technological shift in society, certain classes of jobs disappear and certain classes of jobs appear. Right? All of the wheelwrights disappeared when the car was invented, and then there were a lot of manufacturing jobs in cars, and then those went away, and there are a lot of information technology jobs. So that's the optimistic possibility. We'll put it that way. If in that case, you're not going to do anything. Then there's the pessimistic possibility. The pessimistic possibility is machines get so good at everything that basically you have an IQ bifurcation in the society. People who are really creative and doing work that machines can't do, those people have jobs and everybody else is screwed. Right? All the low-level workers, they're screwed. I think that's a little bit of ways away. The reason I say that is because machines are actually really good at kind of higher brain function stuff, but they're really not particularly good at lower brain function stuff. So for example, you can have a machine that defeats the grandmaster Gary Kasparov at chess, but you can't have a machine that cleans your house. You can have a Roomba, but you can't tell the Roomba to clean your table. Right? It doesn't know how to actually make your bed. So you're actually going to have to hire people to do manual labor because the human brain is developed very sophisticated actually in terms of motion, but not as sophisticated in terms of logic. But that's again, answering around the question. Let's assume the worst case scenario, everybody loses their job except for the select few at the top. Then you have to start talking in terms of Milton Friedman's universal basic income. Okay. Right? Then you do have to start talking in those terms. Once the entire society is incapable of working, then you have to talk about universal basic income. The good news is that the machines are producing everything in plentiful amounts, so scarcity is also alleviated. So the scarcity problem also disappears in large measure, and everybody's really prosperous and sitting around doing nothing. Then the biggest problem you have is people just having nothing to do and beating the crap out of each other. Because when people are bored, they tend to do bad things.
Turn it into Star Trek.
Right, exactly. If you have the replicator, then theoretically everything, everybody's rich. And so they can do whatever they want. They find all sorts of fun activities to do in their off time. They go and learn cooking or something. But in reality, bored people tend to do bad things. So we'll find out.
Hi Ben, I'm a big fan. My name is Bryce.
I remember you. How's it going?
you remember me. That's actually surprising.
Yeah.
So I have 2 questions for you. I'll try and keep them short because there's a line. So I've had this question for a while of how do I debate abortion at my school, U of D, without statistics, because my friends essentially disregard them. It's really irritating, actually.
So I'll answer that one, then you can do the second. So the way that you argue everything, as you've noticed, is I tend to argue, I have statistics at my disposal, but I like to argue better on moral grounds, because the arguments that people find convincing are ones that appeal to them on a moral level. It's what Republicans do worst. Republicans tend to argue on efficiency grounds and statistical grounds. Abortion isn't bad because lots of them happen. Abortion is bad because each individual abortion is a tragedy for the human life that's being snuffed out. That's why, that's the argument against abortion, not an economic argument about the productivity of society and we need more babies to pay for Social Security.
Okay, so my second question is, how do I deal with my friend who will literally punch me when we're having an argument?
You shouldn't be friends with that person. That sounds like a bad person.
Okay, I'll try that.
Hi Ben. So I'm a libertarian, so I share a lot of similar views about the role of government in our lives. Obviously, there are places where we disagree, maybe on some immigration or foreign policy. But a big thing we
probably more on foreign policy depends on where we're going on immigration.
Right. But a big thing we agree on, obviously, is fiscal responsibility. And recently, about 2 months ago, second week of January, Republicans voted on a budget that added $9.7 trillion to our national debt.
Yes, indeed, they did.
Yep, for the next 10 years, and using the excuse that it had reconciliation instructions for Obamacare, which could have been put into any budget. And 2 or 3 months ago, some friends introduced me to your podcast. I've listened to every podcast, and I could be wrong, correct me if I am, but I don't remember you bringing that up. And
No, I hadn't talked about that actually, so I'm happy to talk about it now. Blowing out the budget is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So this idea that you're going to, you're going to incentivize growth and you're going to grow your way out of budget deficits. Bush tried that. It actually worked a little bit. If you look at the size of the budget gap, it actually decreased over the course of his presidency. If you look at Ronald Reagan, did the same thing. It blew up, and then it started to decrease because of the size of the economy. But I don't think that we should make economic growth decisions based on how much money we can give the government. This is where I disagree with the fundamental premise of the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve is right? For those who don't know the Laffer curve is named after Arthur Laffer. His basic economic theory was, if tax rates are 0, the government takes in 0 money. If tax rates are 100%, the government takes in 0 money because nobody works. And so somewhere in there is sort of the happy medium. The reason I don't like that argument is because I don't think that economic growth should be predicated on how much money the government can take in. So, I would prefer that they go through and slash wholesale. I think there are lots of programs that ought to be reverted back to the state level. The federal government has no business in them. And again, they've been signing off on bad budgets for years, but that's because the American people tend to have this bizarre notion that they can slash and burn budgets, but it will never impact a program that they personally like. And there are statistical reasons for that, actually. But in the end, if you're going to cut government, you actually have to cut government, not just cut taxes.
So to add on to that, just another question. Yeah, so I think it was just one Republican member of the Senate, Rand Paul, voted no on that budget, and it was about 7 members of the House, including Massey and Amash.
Amash, yeah, of course, Amash.
So, yeah, he's kind of local here, but
yeah, he's right on that, by the way.
Yeah, so I was wondering,
taken spending lots of money. I think that it's going to be incremental. Also, the vast majority of spending that's happening is on these massive entitlement programs. It's not on defense, right? Defense is 20% of the American budget. Virtually the rest of the budget is taken up by Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all these massive entitlement programs. And this is why this actually is a problem for Trump. The one thing that Trump keeps saying is he's not going to touch the entitlements, he wants to expand them. So this is where, in the end, if you actually want to cut government spending, you're going to have to get on board with entitlement reform, which is a very, very dangerous third rail of politics. If you're going to do it, now would be the time to do it. Trump's also not the guy who wants to do it, so that's going to be a significant conflict inside the party, for sure.
Thanks.
Hi, Ben. My name's Chris. I'm a huge fan of yours. I was just wondering, I've got a bit of debt, and it's mostly medical bills and college
tuition. If we were to move to a free market approach in healthcare or education, what do you think would be the benefits or maybe the detriments to the society?
Okay, as you may have noticed, I'm a big fan of free markets. So here are the benefits with no detriments. Congratulations. So the benefits to a free market approach to education are very simple. No one funds your education if they don't think it pays off. The big problem right now, you have government sponsoring education. How does the government foreclose? Let's say that you got your degree in something absolutely useless and then you went and worked for 20 grand a year. How does the government come and foreclose on your degree? They can't. It's not something material. This is why education loans, when I went to law school, I had private education loans at a pretty low rate of interest. Why? I was going to Harvard Law. They knew I was going to get a job afterward and pay it back. So it's a good bet. That means the banks have a better fix on what exactly is going to pay off. You'd also get rid of half the staff at a lot of these universities who are teaching silly things that don't matter. So that would be a side benefit. As far as health care, the biggest problem in healthcare is undersupply of medical care. Everybody likes to talk about medical insurance. Medical insurance is not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that you have scarcity. Not enough doctors, right? Not enough doctors who are capable of doing what you want. Because if there were enough doctors capable of doing what you want, in a free market system, they would be competing with each other, and they would be therefore providing you the care more cheaply. Right now, medical insurance is not medical insurance, it is medical care. Right? So the idea is that you have to go through your insurance company every time you visit the doctor for a cold, or the flu, or something. And that's silly, and that's how you run up medical bills. And then they also have then the doctors have an interest in charging a higher rate to you if you don't have insurance because they want to force you into the insurance system in some ways. So what really should exist in the insurance system is basically catastrophic insurance for if you have cancer or if you have, you break your leg in some sort of car accident, something really bad happens, now you're covered. And that's what you pay for, right? And that's what insurance companies would insure you for. No insurance company in their right mind would insure you for colds because they know you're going to get them. Right? It's silly. You wouldn't have a cold insurance company. You have a health insurance company that covers the whole thing because it's so heavily regulated. But the reality, my wife's a doctor at Kaiser in California, and the fact is that if you want to incentivize more doctors to go into the business, it's incredibly rigorous to become a doctor. You have to go through a hugely long process. It's incredibly expensive. You have to work at a residency for crap pay for years. And then you get out, and then the insurance companies are going to jack you around for certain rates of reimbursement. If you want better medical care in a free market system, it wouldn't happen immediately. The transition is the hard part. If you actually had a free market system, what you would have is people paying more money, but you'd also have more insurance because presumably you would know that if you don't have insurance, then you would go bankrupt. There has to be a market incentive to buy insurance. And this idea that everyone can equally have the same access to health care, that ends up with scarcity, as it does in Canada, where you're waiting 6 months for a hip replacement.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. I'm Ben Swanson. I'm a senior at the Big Rapids High School, and I'm a hardcore libertarian.
I can tell by the way you wear your belt. Absolutely. I have like a psychic gift for being able to tell how people are politically.
Oh, I'll hope to learn that talent. So, my Myers-Briggs type is an INTJ. I've been described as a machine, an encyclopedia, and a jackass. I have very little emotional empathy.
Welcome to the club.
Exactly. I thought we might have some brethren there. So, in 7th grade, of course, for me, this was when the GOP debates in the 2012 election were going on, and I realized that the only two human beings who were making any logical sense on the stage at the time were Dr. Ron Paul and Governor Gary Johnson.
Okay, I'm not quite that libertarian.
Well, I'll forgive you for that. But I was noticing a couple of themes tonight. Now, a little background on my situation with the high school. I'm a band kid, I'm a choir kid, I'm friends with all the drama kids. I'm not exactly friends with the welders and the people who are going to support the alt-right or the libertarian movement. A lot of progressives.
I'm not sure all the welders support the alt-right. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration. And I'm pretty sure that's an exaggeration, and if we're going to go with stereotypes, there are a lot of supporters of Ron Paul, dude, who are very weird.
Granted. But...
And I didn't get to Gary Johnson. Granted, most of the supporters are not in Aleppo, as it turns out.
That being said, much of the culture in the fine arts community obviously is very progressive, and so I've had the opportunity in the last couple of years to have quite a bit of good conversation, and it was interesting going from my freshman year to my senior year. From my freshman year, it was, shut up, Ben, we don't care. And now going into my senior year, people are beginning to actually open up and discuss things like rational human beings. And so, I have a couple friends in particular that are along those lines. But coming into this room tonight, I noticed two stark differences to those. One, partway through the evening, shortly after your official talk ended, I noticed...
This is a rather long recap. Is there a question mark at the end?
It's coming. I noticed...
Please try not to delay it.
Droves of leftists with noticeably clenched jaws leaving the room. And that's for two reasons. One, it seems that over the past century,
oh God, I
as
remember all that.
Right. So as victimhood culture progresses, and as free thought dies, essentially, as people are leaving the room, that's for two reasons. And I have a personal challenge to you, which sounds more absurd to me than it does to you, trust me. As witty as we can be, and as fun as it is to provoke people, letting somebody know that you care about them as a human being, and that their position is valid even if it is completely wrong, we have to distinguish that, and that's extremely important to let them know.
Okay, first my sarcastic response. Okay, next my actual response, which is, if you've actually seen me talking to folks from the left, it seems like a pretty normal conversation. The people who walked out were not interested in engaging in normal conversation. We had a bunch of people, and I thank them, people of the left, who got up and actually asked questions, and we had a normal conversation, which I am more than happy to do. In fact, I really enjoy it. One of the things that pisses me off when I'm on campuses and people walk out and storm out and shove on me. I would say that some of the time it's on the people who are rioting when I show up on campus. As far as compassion, again, I'm perfectly happy to be compassionate with someone if they want to have a rational discussion. But compassion, as you may have noticed from my slogan, is not exactly what I think rules the roost when it comes to politics, because compassion can very often turn into, very quickly, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
And that's a real danger. I can care about, like, a lot of people don't want to hear answers. If I say, I care about transgender kids committing suicide, and I don't think that the solution to that is to declare a new civil rights movement and encourage gender-confused children to engage in transgenderism further. That 80% of children desist from transgenderism at the time they reach adulthood. If I say that that's something that I'd like to promote because it turns out there's a high comorbidity between transgenderism and suicide, people walk out and get pissed. Right? To me, that's a compassionate point of view. I want less people committing suicide. I want more people living in health, and I want a society that has healthy notions and biologically true notions about sex. But if you are determined to be offended, you're going to be offended.
And that's true. Offended is a choice.
Exactly. Now, I will say that I'm not going to pretend all things that are said are equally offensive. That's not true, obviously.
Hi, Ben. I'm Matt. I'll just get right to my question.
That's such a relief. Thank you.
It seems public universities will only bring up the fact that they are federally funded when it is convenient for them. For example, on the issue of medical marijuana, most schools will not endorse it for fear of loss of federal funding. However, they seem much less concerned about losing this funding on issues of free speech and other rights for students. I wanted your opinion on the matter, and if there's anything you think we can do as students or a larger population to fix that.
Okay, so first of all, I think you're right that it's an excuse. I think a lot of universities have not taken particularly strong stands on marijuana because parents don't want to send their kids to smoke pot in college. And I think that's really the real reason. But the truth is, campus police are it's almost extraordinarily unlike the states. Virtually no one is in prison for just possession. It's like 3.6% of all prisoners in states across the United States are in for simple drug possession, and most of that was pled down from drug dealing. So de facto, it's not criminal. Dealing is criminal. Smoking is not criminal. Now, let me make something clear. I hate marijuana. I think it smells terrible, and the people who smoke it near me annoy the living crap out of me. So you're lucky I'm not a fascist, because obviously my libertarian inclinations overcome that. But as far as colleges that take very strong stands on sanctuary cities, for example, but won't take a strong stand on marijuana, I think a lot of it's virtue signaling. I think also there's a lot less hubbub around decriminalization of marijuana, specifically because very few people are actually being arrested on college campuses for this sort of thing. And again, it's just not as hot button an issue. When I was at UCLA, they had, what is it, 440 day, whatever the day is, 420? I don't give a crap. All the potheads would go out to Kirkhoff Lawn, and 400 of them would smoke. Now, in those days, I was a little bit more law and order focused, and my position on marijuana was basically, if you're breaking the law, then we should at least pretend to care about it. So I will admit that I was the guy who called the cops on the 400 potheads smoking on the lawn at Kirkhoff. But that is it. But my position has moderated somewhat, although not completely. I still don't think you should smoke pot in public and bother other people.
Well, my question was more about the, like they take a strong stance on that to avoid.
Right, and I'm saying I think that a lot of that is political convenience. I think they take strong stances when they think it's politically convenient, and they don't when they don't. Which is basically the premise of your question, so yes, you're correct.
Well, I'm also wondering too, do you have any suggestions to get them to take that stance?
Yeah, make it more of a non-campus issue, make it more of a mainstream issue. Like the campuses in Colorado and Washington aren't having these problems, I assume.
Well, I'm saying they're adamant about like keeping marijuana off campus, but like
yeah, I mean I don't know this particular campus. You know, I don't know what the rules here are.
Well, no. I don't care about the pot. I'm asking about the rights. They don't seem nearly as involved in protecting the rights of students as far as free speech, because this is a federally funded campus and they should protect free speech.